All right, welcome back to Beyond the Court with League One Volleyball, where we deep dive with some of the top coaches and leaders in volleyball and beyond. I'm your host, Courtney Thompson, and we all know that a great coach will challenge their athletes to find their best in all areas of their game, while also helping to inspire and motivate them in ways that go far beyond the court. Today we are joined by Don Bartel, or better known to me as Mr. Bartel, who has been a teacher and a coach for over 25 years, serving as a head coach for 17 years. He has experience not only coaching at the middle school, high school, and collegiate level, but has also taught leadership programs and genuinely changes every single school he's connected with. He has been a consultant for coaches and teachers throughout the country and has really just committed to the craft of helping others find their best. He's an incredible speaker, an even better human, and has been a huge part of my family's life and also helped shape me, at a really cool time in my life. And it is an honor to have you on today. Mr. Bartel, thank you so much for being here.
Well, I have to tell you that you gave me something before you left also, and it's something that I have used to help kids for years now, isn't it crazy? For decades now.
Yes, it is crazy.
And also something that's brought me back to center and kind of grounded me when I needed to remember like the thing that you want's behind the thing you don't want to do. And you told me when you came back the first time I saw you after your first season of college volleyball, and I asked you like, what's the new learning court? Like, what's the thing you're figuring out? And you said, when you were in high school and you'd have a bad game, like a bad basketball game, you would come out and you'd run lines. We'd have to kick you out of the gym.
Yeah.
And it was this whole thing of like, you're getting your confidence back, or you're rebuilding yourself, or you're doing something you have control over. And you said what you learned after that college volleyball season was that's not what you should be doing at all. Like at that point in time, what you needed to do was face what you weren't doing well and focus on that. Oof. And there was a feeling of like you had learned that you were avoiding the work you needed to do by doing the work you were good at. That's the one thing we always knew about you Thompson kids was that we could push and push and push. And there was more of a competitive, you want to find the end, there's no end. Like I will keep going. So yeah, when you say Trevor was a punk, that was the punk attitude of him was, oh, you want to challenge? Oh, this is a competition. Oh, this is a challenge. Okay. I'm not going to drop. This is not going to stop. I'm going to keep going. And I think I used that more than anything because there was a part of me that wanted to do that as a coach, because it was easy for me to go back and say, well, we're going to go back and we're going to do what we do, instead of listening to what kids were telling me or looking at them objectively at what they could accomplish. And we were forcing things on them that I was good at, not that they weren't maybe necessarily able to do.
That's so cool. I forgot about that. And that's so hard. That was a lesson I feel like I had to relearn over and over and over, probably still.
Yeah, I feel like all the good ones are like that, right?
Yeah. So can we start with, can you just share a little bit about your career and what got you to where you are today before we totally dive in and geek out?
So it's funny that you bring up The Alchemist, because The Alchemist got me to leave teaching the first time.
Wow.
I read that book and I was like, yes, I need to go do this thing. But I think deep down inside, if we're going to talk about like core mission purpose pieces, I would tell you that I felt like there were things I needed to do because I needed to go through some things to become something. And I remember when I was first teaching, I thought, oh, people like to listen to me talk. Like I've got this thing that I can do. And then I went and I sat down with Tom Shampoo and said, oh, and I'm at 23 or 24 years old. And I'm like, Tom, this is what I want to do. And he laughed at me and said, you have no pedigree. Like you have to have a reason why people are going to come in the room and join you. So you have to have something that backs up what you're saying. And I've never forgotten that. So I think packed with this idea of the world's going to conspire in my favor. I'm on my personal legend and I need to develop a pedigree. I was like, I need to challenge myself. So I left. I coached college football as a grad assistant for 3 years at Washington State. I showed up at a great time. I've had incredible luck my entire career. I feel like I've had like maybe 4 losing seasons in almost 30 years. I've been super lucky.
That's amazing.
Where I've been. Yeah. And it's, I don't have anything to do with that the first 15 years or something, but it's the idea that I walk in, we win the Pac-10 championship. Ooh. I know I got to see you playing Bowler Gym more than once, right? And when that was over with, I realized I didn't want to coach college football. I wanted way more control over my life. I didn't
Yeah.
necessarily like the recruiting aspect of it. And I felt like I had gotten what I needed to out of that experience. So from there, I got a job at Eastlake High School. I taught there and coached there for 3 years. I left there to be the head football coach at Enumclaw High School. I taught and coached there for 4 years. I was done there, had a layover year where I went to Skyline. Coach was one of my good friends. We won the state championship, so I guess it was an okay year. And then got the job at Eastlake as the head job at Eastlake. And then I was there for almost 10 years building that program up. And then I took 3 years off and I traveled and did trainings, worked for a startup SEL company, looked at maybe developing an athletic side of that. It's not really where the work ended up taking us. Took us in a different direction. So in February of 23, I left there and started coaching and teaching again. And now we are building a leadership program. And I'm with the guy who's in his 3rd year as the head coach at our program at Mount Si High School. And we're back in it again. So serving the good work.
So there's so many things I'm excited to talk to you about. I think one of them is kind of the art of coaching and talking about process and purpose. When I was young, Mr. Carr used to say, I've said this a lot on this podcast, it's the journey, not the destination. And I was the one in the back going, bullshit, you probably never won anything. So.
Yeah, what's your pedigree, buddy?
Yeah, I was like, the journey, screw the journey. I want to win this thing. And I do think for competitive people, this is something we wrestle with. And for all of us, it's just easy to get distracted by outcomes. So I want to start by asking you, I think you do this really well. How do you help your young athletes in a time of comparison, social media, all these shiny things, to really focus on the process and commit to that when they really want the result on the other side?
Okay, so I geek out these days. Like, I have spent so much time trying to figure out what, there's no hacks, there's no shortcuts. We all know that. But there are things I think you have to learn from experience, but I think there are things that you can be told. And then once you're told those things, because they are absolute facts, then you can take that information and apply it to those things you need to learn the hard way or through experience. So my first thought is the mistake we make with it's the journey, not the destination, is we don't say why. The science is very clear. It's so funny that we're starting with this because I just talked about this an hour ago in class. And I said, you guys, you can be an absolute drug addict on your own juices because as you're doing this journey, as you're pursuing this goal, things are popping off in your brain that are saying right thing, wrong thing, right thing, wrong thing. And it's this incredible feeling of purpose and energy. If we're doing it right, it's never ending until we get the thing. And then it all stops. And so when we say, I bought in that, I loved that. As a coach, I loved it. I thought that's super cool.
Yeah.
But it wasn't until I realized why. And then I had my own experience to apply it to. So we won the state championship, clock's counting down. The game wasn't really close. We had some time for it to sink in. And as soon as the horn goes off, we're all dapping each other up and loving each other up and life is good. And before I even stepped on the field to walk across to shake hands with the other coaches, I'm thinking to myself, how am I going to do this next year?
Jeez.
That was it.
Yeah.
That was it. And I would tell kids for years, like, everybody cries at the end of the season. You either cry because it's over before you were ready, or you cry because it's over because you won. That's it. So for us, we do the mantra here is, and I constantly pound it into leadership class as much as anywhere. We are outcome aware, but we are purpose and process driven.
Ooh.
Okay. I don't have to tell you we need to win. I don't. I really don't. In fact, I had this incredible dad, Chuck Lee, rest in peace, passed the cancer, but anybody that knew Chuck in the area knows his impact. Coached his younger son, Turner. And there's just this idea of you come in hot most of the time when you're young, but when you know that kids really want to win a game, you don't have to do that. You really kind of pull back and you're like, okay, fellas, here's the deal. I know this is important to you, but man, what an incredible moment. Like, let's take some of the heat off this thing for a second so you can get back physiologically right and get yourself dialed so you're breathing right and everything's functioning correctly and you're not running out there to kill. You're running out there to execute the way you've been taught, right? So we get behind all these pieces of like, how does this work? Where's my body at? What do I need to be thinking? What's my focus need to be? Maybe the movies aren't really giving me what I need. We don't need the fiery halftime speech. We don't need the fiery pregame speech, which is odd because I feel like I crafted my reputation around some of those things. But
you're so good at it.
The reality is that I think we have to continually focus on what got us here and why are we here? What have we prepped for? And let's continue to return to that. Let's continue to bring that back to center. So then we're telling them the what behind and the why behind and the how behind, and then we're giving them the ways that we bring it back. One of the things that we always talk about is praxis. Actions first, feelings follow. Or in our vernacular, it's if you want to feel the thing, you got to do the thing. And so when we talk about what works and how it functions for us to stay on mission and not be emotion driven, but mission driven, like what we're really doing is focusing on the skills and the processes we've been taught. And they understand why those things are important. They understand how they work, so they know how to refocus themselves. And I don't know who said this the first time I ever heard it. By the way, that whole outcome aware but purpose and process driven needs to be credited to the women's lacrosse coach at Middlebury, I think. I read it in a book somewhere, but you ever know, like when you know what you're into, you read something and you're like, oh my God, that's us.
Yeah,
that's us.
I love that.
She gave me the verbiage for that. So that was incredible. But we talk about praxis and we get them to understand that if you want to feel better, then you have to do better. And so we're going to just front the actions always, always, always. So they don't really have a choice with process. It's understanding then that process is tied to the purpose, and the purpose is what gets us up off the ground when we're hurting.
Okay. Can you tell us how you guys think about teaching purpose to a young person? Because it feels to me like it's a time where they're figuring it out. It's evolving. You can't really tell someone their purpose. Mm-hmm. So how do you guys help foster that?
Okay. So first, I want to say that we want to be student focused, right? I know that this is a selfish time in the lives of the kids that I'm teaching and coaching. And I don't want to take that away from them. They're concerned about so many different things in this era. And I know you're never going to hear kids these days thing from me. I'm not buying into it. I don't think it serves a purpose. Human nature never changes. So this has always been a really selfish time for us. And I want to give them the ability to be selfish. So the phrasing.
What a beautiful perspective. Sorry to interrupt.
No,
That's
go ahead.
Awesome.
Yeah.
No, just like your whole approach as a coach. Like, I think it's easy to get in they're doing like the frustration of it. And to just start with that's an amazing place to come from.
Well, so we give them a purpose of personal development in the service of others. So go at it. Wow. Be selfish about the weight room. Be selfish about your playing time. One of those young kids that I coached this year two of them sat in here and said, I should have played more. Perfect. I'm not doing my job if you don't feel like you should have played more, right? It's where that's coming from. They're like, I should have played more, but I was slower to get it. I was slower to develop. I just should have been better. Like, okay, now we're really onto something. But we start with that idea, tell them you get to be selfish. And then we say, okay, here's your phrase, 2 words, integrated regulation. We're going to tell you, take care of your teammates, give all you got all the time, do what's difficult. So you got those 3 things that you're working on. But you're telling me, I want to have a great senior season, I want to get recruited, and I want to play college football. We're going to integrate these 2 things. And then you are going to internally regulate that. So now this is part of who I am. Because you know that if you take care of your teammates, if you give everything that you've got, if you do what's difficult, that's going to get you recruited, make you have a great year, and you're going to have an opportunity to play after high school. So what we understand is that the external is not effective for long periods of time whatsoever. The money is a motivator for an instant. We get tired of it. We're looking for something. We're much more purpose-driven animals, right? So we say, You take your drive, your goals, the thing that you want, and I'll show you how those align with our stuff. And then once they adopt that, once they integrate that, our things are now their things and it's internal for them. So that's the only, from what I've been able to read and what I've been able to see, the only true external motivator is the external one that turns internal through integrated regulation. And that's it.
Yeah.
And so you buy in. That's when you're in.
When you have a freshman come in and you speak life to this, this is a impossible question. How long does that take, or where are the barriers, or where do you see buy-in for a kid to like really understand this?
Capacity.
Yeah.
Capacity. So there's this funny thing. You know, I love your buddy, Dr. Mike, when he says there's a secret handshake. Yeah. There's a secret handshake in the NFL. And there are these weird things that we don't talk about. And I think the one at our level, because we're so focused on teaching, or at least should be, is that there's a point, I think, in every coach's relationship with a player where they're rooting against their own kids. Nobody else wants to talk about it, but I rooted against Trevor. There were lessons that he needed to learn. Yeah. I wasn't sure that I was able to teach him because I was so young and dumb back then. But there are times in every season where I look at a kid and say, cool. You do you, buddy.
Right.
Let me know how that works out for you.
Right.
And they'll come back to you. Okay. So, but with a freshman, to be specific to that question, a freshman's not going to have those opportunities. Those opportunities I can manufacture and practice. I can create some sort of controlled situation for them. But this is where the leadership part comes in. I need to be an experiential teacher. So I need to create these other pieces, these other activities, initiatives, games, if you will, that they go through that helps at least teach them the lesson. Because until they develop the capacity, they're never going to be able to accept all the knowledge. It's one of the reasons why kids have to take the same class, have to take leadership over and over and over again. Learn the lesson, like get the info, go through the experience in class, process it, cool, put it somewhere. Then go out and do your summer job. I'll see you in the fall. We'll learn it again and you'll be like, oh my God, I was working a Saturday shift and this person did this. And I thought to myself, that's it. Pull it out of the gray matter, they use it, and there you go, right? So how can we develop capacity for those kids in a way that they can start to understand, not just learn, but understand? You know, the learning is you can recite it. The understanding is you can apply it. So that's the piece of creating capacity. I think that's the greatest barrier.
I want to ask you specifically what you're teaching, like principle-wise of leadership and all those things, but we'll get to that. But when you're creating a practice, you coach football, a lot of our coaches coach volleyball, but how much time, like how do you weave these messages in? The best coaches I've been around teach mindset, they teach a regulation, they teach emotions. They don't always explicitly say that, but like, how do you weave that into your day-to-day?
I can tell you that when we're dialing in, and I've worked with coaches, I've worked with ADs on this. Yeah. In fact, probably the best story of this is a buddy of mine who got a special teams coordinator job in an SEC school. And when he took over that unit, they were ranked like 130th in the country. He calls me up and said, I want to do your thing. I want to do everything that let's go. Like I'm all in. So we Zoomed, we sent documents back and forth. We dialed it all in. We got together his core purpose. We talked about why he does what he does. Then we talked about what players need to do to be successful in that scheme. What kind of effort they need to give, or how they develop some ownership over it. And then what they can give if they're not quite there yet, so they still have a sense of belonging there, right? Because what we're really talking about is things are tough. So what we really need to develop is, how do we develop a culture around we're going to be resilient? Like everybody always talks about grit or mental toughness. And the reality is the research is already out there. If you make people feel like they belong, if you give them ownership over the quality of their experience, and you make it feel like they have the skills or you can teach them the skills, then they'll be more resilient, right? Yeah. So we look at that as okay, you've got your pieces and those will help direct those three things that are important. Now, let's just prove that you are who you say you are. Plan a practice. So he does. I want you to take the three things you said that those kids needed to do, and I want you to overlay on your practice plan where you see those three things. And if you don't see them, you're either not about them or you've just figured out the problem. And it doesn't have to be all of them at once. Like, like the example I was using, we tell our kids, take care of your teammates. Okay. So when we first start, we do a culture install. We don't sacrifice scheme. We just say today it's all about taking care of your teammates. So I'll set up different formations, different calls, different checks. I want them talking to each other. I want the linebackers to do something where they have to move the D lineman in front of them. I want safeties twisting, and I want talking. I heard a guy one time say it's like chirps. They go out, they say it's a 3 chirp drill. So all 3 levels are chirping at each other.
Oh, cool.
They're all communicating, right?
Yeah.
So for day 1, it's take care of your teammates. For day 2, it's give all you got all the time. So maybe we are really pushing them tempo-wise to go, 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 go.
Yeah.
And then the next day might be do what's difficult. So we're going to really press them. And those are the days where I might fake frustration, not fake it. I mean, your frustration's real, but I know that I wouldn't lose my mind over something like this. But you might really press them to really put the heat on them, because it's another thing that we'll say all the time is the thing is not the thing. You think that you're supposed to be calling the right check here. All I want to do is I want to see if you're paying attention to the guy left of you and make sure he's in the right spot. I just want to make sure that you're seeing this one thing. That's it. But they think it's this other thing, right? So I would say it's the cultural overlay. Do the work. What are you about? Bruce Brown asked me, one of the best things ever happened to me was Coach Brown said to me, Donnie, when I come and watch your team, what am I going to see? And I said all this stuff. They're going to be tough. They're going to be competitive. They're going to take care of each other. They're going to love each other. And he's like, awesome. What's that going to look like? And I was dumbfounded. I had no idea what that looks like. Right.
Yeah.
And then you get into this idea of that's culture. That's norming, right? You have to know what it looks like, what it doesn't look like, and how we do it. And so we'll overlay that. So my buddy, he follows through. He does this thing. The next thing you know, the special teams room is the hot room to be in. When your starting quarterback who has nothing to do with special teams is in there leading chants and claps, and these guys are getting after it. They finished the year in every single rating metric organization, top 5 in the country. And it's because there was a very simple understanding of expectation. This is what we're about. This is how you align. Yeah. Regulation, right? Yeah. Like I integrated regulation, and this is where we're going from here. And then he just stayed consistent with it. And every day it was, how does this reflect our core values? Because usually it's not that we don't believe in it. It's that we think we're teaching it, but we just need to explicitly say, we are going to, do you remember when Carr used to have you guys like, I remember this drill that Carr had you guys do, because one time I got all dressed up. I put on the headband, the sweatband. I had the short shorts and the knee-high socks, and I went running in there, and like Carr's like, I have a special guest to show you how to get this done. And I got to do it, and then I sprinted out of the gym. Yes. But I think like everybody has their stuff, but if you don't explicitly teach it, and here's my big pet peeve, and I think Mike Tomlin says something about this, the coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers, that we consistently deny the responsibility of coaching. The obligation of coaching.
I love this. I remember this bit.
Yeah, it was on the Pivot podcast with those guys, Ryan Clark and those guys, phenomenal. And I'm like, yes, that's my biggest pet peeve, because here's what happens. We blame kids because they can't do things that we don't explicitly teach. So the cardinal rule is you cannot hold anybody accountable for things you do not explicitly teach. That's why I'm manic about definitions. Like we're going to talk about a kid's maturity. He's not mature enough. Then what are we talking about? Well, we're talking about the degree to which he understands what he does impacts other people. Oh, we're going to be disciplined. Good. That means we're going to put actions before emotions, right? We have to start defining these things so we can name them. When you can name them on your practice plan and you focus on them, then you're good. Then the kids start picking it up and they start enforcing it. The next thing you know, you're on a run and you're not coaching anymore. They are.
I'm having 10,000 thoughts, but I feel like the best coaches I played for say things so often that at some point you're like, oh my God, we get it. And then that moment,
stop.
Yes. And then that moment that you were saying, like, you're like in playoffs or postseason and you're like, oh, that's what that means. Or, a year later, you're like, oh, This is the deal. And the language thing too, Dr. Mike talks about this. If we can empower them with a shared language, we can diffuse stuff so much more efficiently, you know?
That's a therapy thing. I think it's like name it to tame it.
Yeah.
But we have to give them the vocabulary so they can talk about what's happening in front of them with their peers.
Yes.
If we don't have a shared language, we're missing out. And that's the obligation of coaching.
Yeah, I love that. My biggest pet peeve too, when coaches are like, talk, communicate. I'm like, they don't know what they're supposed to say right now.
Yes.
Before we dive into culture and leadership, can you share a specific example of a time when you were dialed on the process, you're getting buy-in from the athletes, and then maybe they lost right away, it didn't quite work in the short term, and it's like, we keep getting them to buy in, keep going. And then there's like that awkward time where it's like, how do we keep them bought in? So either like what you did in that moment and kind of what happened in the end.
The first thing that comes to my mind is a years-long process. So we have a rival in our league who I think we lost to 6 times in a row because we played them in the playoffs also. So there were 4 or 5 years there. So it was like 5 or 6 losses in a row. And we were the better team in at least 2 of those, if not 3. Year 1, we were the better, more talented team, but it was year 1 of development. We just couldn't get it done. And we needed to get over the mental hump, right?
Yeah.
And then we had the ball for 4 downs inside the 20-yard line and could not score to win the game. Absolutely deflated and defeated.
That's tough.
The next year, we lose in triple overtime on our field. And the awkwardness, when you talk about the awkwardness, it's like we're renewed dedication to the process, renewed a dedication to our identity. These are the things we focus on. All of this will happen. It will be okay. And the awkwardness was, I'm about to walk out there once we shook hands with the other team, about to walk over to where our kids are, and they are distraught. They should have won the year before. They should have won the year before that. They should have won this year. And I don't know, but my worst fear is that they're thinking to themselves, these guys don't know shit about shit. And so in that instance, I made a decision. In the first overtime, when they had the ball, they threw a screen pass to a running back out of the backfield, and he's running down the sideline. He takes 2 or 3 steps with the ball. Our kid comes up and whacks him. Ball goes flying. He scoops it, and we are on the way to win the game. I am like losing my mind, like finally we're over the hump.
Yeah.
And I hear a whistle, and it's the official on our sideline blowing it dead, incomplete pass. And I'm thinking, how in the world is that an incomplete pass? You are not going to rob these kids of this. This is not. And so I start losing my mind out there.
Right.
And Courtney, I'm going to tell you right now, this kid, our senior inside linebacker in my group, steps in front of me and in between this official and I, and he says, Coach, we got this. And I'm like, I don't think I need any more than this. Like, we just won the game.
Yeah.
And I'm not thinking like game literally. I mean, like we just won anything that's going on, right?
Wow.
But the awkwardness at the end of the game was I had to focus on something more than that because that was the same rah-rah of the years before.
Yeah.
And so I walk over to the kids and I tell them, get your freaking heads up. Wipe your goddamn tears and look at me. You are not going to let a single referee's decision on whether or not that was an incomplete or complete pass. What you're going to focus on is, did you do what you needed to do to win that game? He doesn't blow that whistle. Hunter takes it to the house, and we're all celebrating right now. You guys are calling your cousins and your brothers and everybody before you that couldn't beat those guys. I'm not going to sit here and tell you weren't good enough. You were good enough tonight, and I'll give you evidence. What was said to me while I was losing my mind, setting a bad example, is you guys are telling me we got this. And you did exactly what you said you'd do. And you did everything you needed to win that game. Now, what was awkward about it was, really, I'm going to sit there and 1, I'm going to plug a moral victory. And 2, I'm going to blame something on an official. what I really wanted them to focus on was how many times does one thing, razor thin's edge, fall one way or the other? And then I said, if I told you that you had to lose to them 5 or 6 times in a row to never lose to them again, would you take that deal? Because I would. And then that was it. We never lost to them again.
Oh my God.
Right? Now,
That's
the game
phenomenal.
the next year was tough. Like, we had to have a game-winning drive at the end of the game. But I'll never forget the kid laying out on the sideline, dragging feet while he's Supermaning, catching the ball. And I'm like, we're winning this game. We're not losing this game. Now, the dark side of that story is after it was over with, I walked into the equipment room, shut the door, took an old helmet off of the shelf, and destroyed a folding table with it. And I'm sure that it was loud. It was loud in the hallway. I opened up the door, and our 2 like sophomore girl managers are standing there looking at me like wide-eyed. And I'm like, "Hi, ladies. How we doing?" And this kept walking. But, sometimes there's just the reality of the frustration, right? But it's the framing, and you just have to find the things that connect to the things you said were important, so they'll continue to believe they're important.
I love the duality of that, of like the expression of emotions. It's not like you're overriding or just like being Pollyanna about it. Mm-hmm. You're honoring that, and you are reminding them of, no, we did everything we could to win. And that's it. I mean, I feel like in my experience, the athletes that have peace after retirement or after college or wherever that is, are the ones that full sent. And the ones that held back, there's like, they struggle and they blame other people, or they say, well, this wasn't fair. And it's like, it's sad to me. And it's hard. I will also say it's really hard, I think, to full send in life. And it's also freaking awesome. So I love that you're preaching. That's amazing.
Yeah, for me, I think that's probably one of the toughest things to do, because we know what's on the other side of that, right?
Yeah.
But again, if you want to feel the thing, you got to do the thing. Yeah. The thing you want is behind the thing you don't want to do. The thing you're looking for is behind the thing you don't want to see. It's consistent. Those are just the rules, and we don't make them. We just have to understand we have a relationship with them. Either we're going to do something about it and come what may, or we're not, and we'll have to settle with that the rest of our lives. Here we are.
Yeah. That reminded me of our shared mentor, Tom Shampoo. I don't know how these things work in the world, but I know they do. He used to say that to me all the time. That's awesome.
Yes. Love it.
So I think you already said this explicitly, but maybe you'll answer this differently. When you think about building a culture, a new coach coming in, blank slate, what are the most important pieces to get right away?
We need to be accountable. So we're going to assess accurately, act effectively. So first thing first, and this one's kind of funny, but we talk about this all the time. Guys who've coached with me for years, it's like the most important person is the person you're bringing with you. So one, you got to get that right. Who's the person you're bringing to the room with you that's not technically in the room? That when they say, Courtney, will you take the job? You're like, oh yeah, I know I'm taking the job because I'm bringing her with me.
Yeah.
That person is important. The next thing that's important, though, and this is weird, but I think it's important to establish a relationship with the kids you're never going to coach. Now, I have that luxury as a football coach, because anytime I've taken over a program, it's been middle of the year. So I can go watch the wrestling matches and the basketball games and the track meets and the baseball games, and I can talk to the outgoing seniors. Mm-hmm. I want to get a vibe from them about like what they liked, what they didn't like. And to be honest, we know this too. Every job's open for a reason. So you got to find out what that reason is. And then really it's about, and this is the core principle of what we talk about in leadership. When I am developing myself personally in the service of others, my job is to identify and provide for the legitimate needs of the people I serve. It's the story you told me about Karch when he wasn't the head coach yet, and you're in a huddle in a key game, and one of the gals is sick, and she throws up, and he doesn't miss a beat. He dives in through feet and starts wiping that up so it won't become a distraction. It's like our ability to assess and provide for those legitimate needs is huge. So you have to touch base with the hearts of the people in that community to find out what really went wrong. And you have to be able to spot the people that are there to grind an axe. I think we did phenomenal work, but I can guarantee you the guy that replaced us, there are people that could not wait to tell him how awful we were. And you just have to know who you're listening to. Every single community has a Steve Thompson. Every single one of them does. You just have to find him. Yeah. My last guy was a guy named Bobby Cox. Every community's got a Bobby Cox. You just need to find him. You just need to find her, whoever they are. And then when you're really struggling, that's where you go. I'm hearing mixed signals about this Courtney Thompson girl. Like, I don't know if I should trust her or not. When I first took over at Eastlake, there was a kid that had been involved in a horrible situation last year during football season. And people said, you got to get rid of him. He'll never be any good for you. You got to get rid of him. He's going to poison your culture. He was a team captain.
Wow. I just got chills.
So you just got to figure that stuff out, right? It's just who you're listening to. And then, to be honest, this is the part about why we dive into the principles. What are the first principles? What comes before everything else? And it's, can you foster a sense of belonging? Can you give them ownership so they have some say about the quality of their experience? And can you make them feel like they have what it takes and you can teach them the rest? If you can do that stuff and give names to that stuff, you're going to be fine. But you have to remember they don't work on our timeline. And that's probably the toughest lesson I've ever learned as a coach. To have a come to Jesus with a kid. Kids are snot bubbles and crying. And I had a kid once hug me and say, I wish you were my dad. Kid didn't have his dad in his life really. And I'm man, this kid's life is on easy street. I just solved every problem for him. And the very next week, he's body slamming his best friend on a table in the lunchroom. And we're all set back another 6 months. But it's in there. It's in the gray matter, right? And then as a 24-year-old, after playing in college, he comes back and says, I needed that lesson in my life. Well, you didn't learn it for 6 years, but
you punk, you waited till you were done with the program.
Yeah. Man. So I think those are the pieces that are key, but I really lean on the people and finding the right people. And I think your radar, your gut will tell you in the beginning who those folks are.
Yeah.
You make
That's
mistakes.
Beautiful.
You all make mistakes.
Shout out Steve Thompson, who's my dad. What's cool about hearing you talk about that? It is something, Trevor was on the podcast, Trevor, my brother, and he shared something he learned overseas. I had never heard him talk about this, but how in our culture, we don't have as much community ritual outside of church and ceremony and how powerful those connections can be. And so I've actually lately been talking about man, what do you do in these communities? But you're doing that. You're building this mentorship or kind of the wisdom in the community and letting that breathe and respecting it, which is really cool to hear.
Well, that's the thing. Again, it's so funny because we just talked about this in leadership class, the kids, because we're trying to talk about overall school culture, right? What do we really value and what do our actions tell us we value? But we have to ask ourselves, what is the true problem? And I really believe that the true problem, and again, I got to give this credit to somebody else for this, but I really believe that the true problem is that we live in a society that professes the importance and significance of self-reliance and independence. And yet everything inside of our lizard caveman brains and our bodies says we desire connection.
Yeah.
I don't have to leave my house anymore to work, to shop, to get my car worked on, to see a doctor. I don't need any of that. So I have reached peak self-reliance.
Yeah.
And we are the loneliest we've ever been. So what we're trying to do is get a kid, and in my world, it's a 14, 15, 16, 17, 18-year-old kid, trying to get them to blow off all of society to say, yes, I need help. Or yes, I want to be a part of this. Or yes, I want to hang out with you. Or yes, I need to do this thing because I don't want to lose the bond. I don't want to break.
Yeah.
So we're trying to get them to override what society's taught us to get in touch with what our bodies and minds are craving, which is that constant human, genuine, unconditional, action-based, agape-style love that drives relationships to places that helps us grow in ways we could never do on our own. That's the true problem. Wow, and that was a huge thing for me with your dad, because I would say that I did it one time. I made a list of mentors of how did I get where I was and how did I learn that? Who did I learn that from? And I don't know if you ever remember the Thompson family dinners when Coach Bartel would get invited.
I do.
And your mom would make these like cornbread waffles.
Oh, they're so good. Yes.
Oh God.
My
And we
favorite.
would have the
Mustard
greens
Yeah.
on them. Oh, so good. Right.
Yeah.
And I would be just, cause I was a single guy, I'm making $22,000 a year back then.
Oh my God. You were pouring into us too. That's
3
amazing.
sports a year. I was coaching 3 sports a year back then.
You're everywhere.
No social life. You guys were everything. And I'm at your house and I'm just eating like this. And then I look up and the only people at the table are your dad and me. And I'm like, uh-oh.
Oh God.
Because I'm thinking, here it comes, right?
Yep.
And your dad's concern was never about your knucklehead brother. Your dad's concern was always about me. It was the most genuine, beautiful, unconditional sense of, you think about like what a young coach needs.
Yeah.
You're not getting that. And I made myself unapproachable as a young coach because I was so insecure. I thought if anybody got close that I was going to fail them, right? And then Dave Lutz says to me, well, you're coaching baseball, which is the worst sport in the world to coach because every dad has played it and they're 5 feet away from you during the game.
So real.
But your dad says to me, on the one that I remember the most, your dad says to me that he's unhappy with me. So this was a change of pace, right? Yeah. Tells me he's unhappy with me. And I'm like, okay. And he says, this is the middle of Trevor's senior year of baseball, I think. And he says, here's the problem. We're watching our sons right now grind this season out, and they're playing incredible baseball. He said, in fact, this is why I loved him because he was around those kids forever. He's like, here's our level of expectation for these boys. As parents, we know who they are. We know what they're capable of. We got a level of expectation about right here. They are achieving this right now. And I'm thinking, well, why are you upset?
Yeah. And
he said, because your expectation is here and these boys are unhappy because they can't make you happy. Yeah. And I thought, okay, I got to sit with that one for a second. The parents are upset because their boys should be happy, but I am, in essence, not his words, mine, killing that happiness because they're doing more than anybody thought they could do because they're coming together as a group. They were just a solid group of dudes, right?
Yeah.
But I'm killing that for them because I'm expecting the unreasonable. That was on like a Thursday or Friday. The next day the next game was a Saturday morning. We're on the bus. We're on our way to Sumner. And I could not sleep. Like I'm perseverating on this.
Yeah.
And I still remember we're on 410. We're about to hit the exit. And I just got up, stood up on the bus, and I told them something to the extent of, this team will never be together ever again. And the one thing I know is that the only emotions we control are those of gratitude. So when you're nervous or when you're anxious, pause, breathe, take a look around the diamond and realize how freaking cool it is that you get to play with these guys. That's it. 10 random. Went on a run.
Oh my God.
And that's the Steve Thompson run, right? That's because he taught me this lesson over cornbread and mustard greens.
That's right.
And it was something I needed to hear so badly as a young coach that it doesn't prove anything for you to always be grumpy. It doesn't prove anything for you always. Anybody can say, well, that can be done better, faster, stronger.
Yeah.
There should be no prize in that. The prize is being in touch with your group and being able to say, fellas, ladies, folks, we're killing it right now. Yeah. Like we are killing it right now. Well, yeah, but we lost so and so. I don't care. Yeah. You're doing everything I'm asking you to do. I'm not robbing you of your victories because I think we do that as coaches too. We steal victories from kids all the time. Because we need to prove some point about you didn't do what I told you this way, or it's not this way, or it's not that way. And it's like, let them win. Winning is the best cure for what's ailing them. Because I know you've heard this before too. I think this is a Trevor Moad thing. We very rarely, if ever, outperform our self-concept.
Yeah.
So I better be pressing hard on developing how you see yourself. And that doesn't mean you're not getting critiqued. That doesn't mean that I'm not hard on you. That doesn't mean that we're not calling out some things that are unacceptable. It means the hard is the reason. The hard is the key. Hard is what gives it the value. If it's not hard enough to make people quit, it doesn't have value.
Wow. That's so, I don't remember that story. That's really cool.
What a cool dude, huh?
That's Steve. He'll get you. Oh, that could be a whole, we got a lot of
yeah,
Steve stories.
A whole Steve
we'll get
podcast.
There.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
No, I want to hear in your perspective, like I have such regard for coaches. And for someone that's been around the game as long as I have, when I tried coaching, I knew it would be hard, and it was way harder than I thought it would be. And so I loved how you said one of the most challenging things for you is that athletes aren't on your timeline. Mm-hmm. So I would love to hear you, one, talk about that, but also for those young coaches finding what they value, their voice, they're kind of new to this. What would you suggest they think through or commit to?
One, I'm always going to go back to where am I first? I think I got a lot of unnecessary mess on people when I was coaching early in my career. Every time I run into a kid, a grown man now, but every time I run into somebody at a restaurant or with their families, or I'm even at schools where now I'm coaching some of those kids, I will always apologize. I'm really sorry that you didn't get this version of me as your coach. You deserved that. And what you got was some punk ass 24-year-old who was trying to figure it all out. Right. But I think I start with myself consistently. And I want to always ask myself, like, where am I in my coaching career? Because I think where it's the worst is when you're in your prove it phase of coaching.
Yeah.
And you've got kids who are tough to deal with. They're not on your timeline, but you have to prove that you can do it. You have to prove that you know what you're doing or that you're good. And that can be, I don't want to it's not a deadly combination, but it's toxic.
Yeah.
It's toxic in that I have to.
Yeah.
It is, because I'm relying, I saw something this weekend with all the rivalry games that some guy posted. He's like, well, the 19-year-old who plays for my alma mater didn't play well enough, so now I'm in the garage ignoring my family, drowning my sorrows in beer. And I'm like,
that's amazing.
Oh my God. I told a buddy of mine, a guy that's been such a solid support for me. He's been a head coach forever. I told Coach Valek, I said, I'm really uncomfortable with how badly I need us to win this game. I'm not comfortable as a 50-year-old man with a wife and children. Yes. By how much I need a 17-year-old to produce right now. I'm not comfortable with that, but I need this. I need us to win, right? And he responded with, that's one of the toughest things we do is detach our identity from the result, right? From the end deal. So I would say, first thing, do the work on yourself. Like, where am I? What's driving me right now? What am I taking as an adult problem and putting into a child's life? And I think that's a big key. First and foremost, where am I at? The other part is understanding that, man, you owe it to everyone around you to serve the work. There is a level of happiness that comes from, they call it sublime beatitudo. It is the fourth level of happiness that basically says, I am not serving an outcome. I am getting little to no feedback, but I am so connected to like the center of the world, the purpose of my existence, that what I do every day renews me. And I know that I'm doing the right thing because I'm getting payback internally for serving that work. And I think we have to get addicted to the work. And once we do, there's so many phenomenal things that we find inside of there that are so rewarding. That I had a kid in a postseason interview ask me last week, I always ask him, is there a question that hasn't been answered or needs to be asked now that the season is over?
Ooh.
And the question was, how do I make you happy? And my response was, you don't. I'm detached enough from that. Like, I get a sense of satisfaction, but my happiness is for you. I am not tying the result to my happiness. It might be to my sanity at times.
Yeah.
But I'm not tying my happiness to that. I don't want you to try to make me happy. I want us to look at each other and give the wink like we're both freaking competitors. Let's get after this shit.
Yeah, let's go.
Like, I want that. That's what I want. That to me is different. So, and I also, that reminds me of something that a moment that I had with Trevor that he will not think was a moment we had. It was a moment he had with his team, but he taught me something really important there. We are in the playoffs, first playoff game ever in the history of the school, in the history of the program. We're in our second year, and we're down a run, and he hits a walk-off 2-run bomb. Comes around third base, almost takes my hand off. He's so fired up.
I believe it.
He gets to home plate, and they mob him. It's the College World Series pileup, but at home plate. And I had this almost out of body in that I was like, looked at myself almost standing still in the third base box. And I asked myself, like, why aren't you going in there? Like, run in there and celebrate. Yeah. Wasn't my celebration. It wasn't my celebration.
Yeah.
It was the first time in my coaching career in year 2, thankfully, that I realized the goal was actually to celebrate the successes of other people. It was the first time in my life that I was that overjoyed for something I didn't win.
Wow.
I didn't hit home run. I didn't teach him how to hit. Like, I didn't have hardly anything to do with that. He did that. And it allowed me to stand there and learn the lesson of, oh my God, how much freaking cooler is this shit?
Yeah.
That I'm standing there outside of this watching 15, 18 kids that I love have one of the greatest moments of their young lives. Nothing better than that.
That's so cool. What a beautiful shift.
It was crazy. But doing that internal work, I think, is the key. Like, not letting those moments die. And kids will say, like it happened last week, kids like, how many stories do you have? Like, well, I don't think I have any more than anybody else, but I do think, and I'll tell them this all the time in class, because we do these initiatives in class to build the capacity through the experience, right? And then we say the thing is not the thing. So they're trying to figure it all out. But I'm like, here's a separator. I don't know if it's the separator. I think it is. The separator really is two people can go through the exact same situation. The separator is the person that doesn't leave that moment or that memory until they've pulled what they needed out of it. So when you say that somebody has a lot of stories, it's not that they have a lot of stories, although Tom always told us the greatest leaders are the best storytellers.
Yeah.
But it's that you live in that moment and you're like, I just learned something from that. I'm going to get something from that. I'll be damned if I'm not going to get something from that. And that's why one of the best things ever been said to me as a head coach was, the best thing you've done is build a staff you can lose with. I can tell you for 10 years, we never wasted a loss. Never, not one.
That's amazing.
Never turned on each other. Never blamed anybody else. We had some heated moments.
Yeah.
A lot of alphas in the room, and we know there can only be one alpha. So on one night, maybe it was that guy. We'll let him have his moment, right?
Yeah.
But the reality of it was we were going to come back down and we're going to say what happened. And let's be real honest about what happened. Let's debrief this thing. Let's brief back that we all learned the same thing, and let's move forward.
And let's go. I think as a young person too, we just think this thing is going to make or break, or this is going to set up my whole life. And I love that lesson. I want to be respectful of your time. I would love to have you back on because I love being around you. I always get fired up. I always want to be better at everything I do and for the people around me when I get to talk to you. So,
right back at you, Court.
Yeah, this is amazing.
Right
Thank
back
you.
at you.
Thank you. But I want to end with, if every youth coach in the country could understand one thing a little bit better, what would you hope that would be?
Your job is to foster a love of team and competition in every one of those kids. I cannot tell you how many times that we have had an all league, all conference, all state player who almost quit football because they were never good enough in youth league, or somebody tried to weed them out because they were 5'0". And when we got them, they were 6'5". So your job is to foster that and do it in the right way. So it's not X's and O's. It is, we're going to teach you how to be a good teammate. We're going to teach you how to love competition. That means love the tough stuff. And we're going to highlight, please, please, please reinforce the things that matter. I don't want to hear stories at banquets where guys are talking about how cool it was that so-and-so hit somebody and then stood over the top of him, or how cool a kid is with his face paint or a visor on. Like, those things don't make the world go round. Like those are cool things that maybe you pound your chest over, but that's weird alpha stuff. Like that's ego stuff. Like we want kids that by the time they get to us, we don't have a bunch of unlearning. We just continue the process of teaching.
Yeah.
So that for me is the biggest thing. And I say that having coached I-9 flag football, like this is the most challenging thing I've ever done in my life. I am not, I have a floor, Court. I have a floor. I can only coach kids at a certain age and above.
That's so great.
Because I'm just not good enough.
Yeah.
It is hard down there. And those coaches are phenomenal.
Yeah.
They are phenomenal. And it's not me. It's not me.
Yeah. Oh, so well said. Yeah. This is going to help so many people, including myself. And I think the world of you. I respect your work. I love you. You've made an incredible impact on my life, my family's life. And this is a very fun full circle for me. So thank you for everything. Thank you for helping all these coaches.
I know that you are now at your age starting to understand some of what that feels like, but sitting in my seat, like even when you just reached out of like, hey, would you consider this? I'm like, are you nuts? Like if I get to be on with you for an hour to talk about the things that we love the most.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't be anywhere if I wouldn't be where I am right now, or at least I would have taken a lot harder road if it hadn't have been for cornbread, waffles, and mustard greens.
Cornbread. We got to run it back over Christmas.
Right. Yeah. Yes.
Let's go.
Yes. You just
Amazing.
let Linda know I'm always a fan. Everything compares to that.
All right. Thank you all for tuning in to Beyond the Court. And thanks to our guest, Don Bartel, for joining us today. Make sure to hit the subscribe button so you don't miss the next episode. And to learn more about League One Volleyball, follow us on Instagram at LOVB. And in the meantime, keep working hard, having fun, and go on and spread the love today. All right. We'll see you next time.